Hello.
Hello.
How are you?
How's it going, man?
It's going.
Good.
Well, it ain't going. That's
Yeah, we're not going nowhere.
Lord God, this is nuts, ain't it?
Yeah, it sure is. We've been hunkered down at home for quite a while.
Yep. I have to. I
Man,
don't get. I go to the grocery store and I play guitar and that's about it.
man, I was so looking forward to playing some music with you at Merle Fest this last time around.
Oh, me too. It was. I was. It will happen, and I sort of did it virtually anyway.
Yeah, that's true. You made it happen.
Yeah, it did. Man, I hope you don't mind that I did that.
Oh, me and Brian got a kick out of that.
Well, I've actually done another one, but I know I don't want to be that guy.
Oh man, well send it to me because I'd love to see it.
Well, it's actually you did something like Austin Radio or something. You did Nashville Blues.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and I was just messing. It just gives me something to do, so I would sit down and play with it. The cool thing is with you and Brian, it's like it's like falling into that pocket again. It's you two guys really understand. That's what's really cool. You
Man,
get it.
well, I think both of us, I can speak for Brian too. We both kind of grew up kind of worshiping y'all, man. Listening to, those records that you guys made, Doc and Merle and all that stuff. And,
Right.
I mean, I cut my teeth on that stuff. My dad started me out when that's the first music I really remember learning and hearing around the house is, Doc's records.
Yeah.
And
They were. It was.
my dad played all that stuff a lot, and he's a good picker and singer, and we just love Doc so much around my house, and we listen to all those records. In fact, I'm sitting here in my living room and I got a good collection of those records right here that
Yeah.
I've inherited from my dad. It's just so incredible, and it's incredible to talk to you today, T. Michael. I've been a fan since, like I said, since I was a little kid, and um, I remember sitting around the TV in the living room watching this. We had this old VHS tape of that Blue Sky concert at the college, or whatever that film was that
Right.
we had it on VHS, and man, that concert was so great.
Was Merle there?
I believe so.
Oh, good. Yeah, because there's some that he was not.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I think I remember that one. Uh, Doc always got a little bit nervous when we would do those video things,
Mhm.
and it wasn't because he didn't think that he could do it. He just felt more the center of attention when it was like that. You know how hard it is to play. It's harder to play to one person than it is for 10,000.
Yep. Absolutely. And it's harder to play for a camera than just about anything.
Oh, I know. It's just that is very true.
Yeah.
It's funny. I've got a picture. Brian sent me a picture. I guess it was at Union Grove. He and his dad came up to the record table. He's got a picture of, I think he's probably 12 or 13 years old, and they were talking to me.
Oh man. That's
He's
awesome.
quite the picker.
He's incredible. Yeah, I don't, I look up to him, and I learn a lot from that dude every time we sit down and pick. I pick something up, and I'm always stealing his stuff.
Right. Don't we all steal stuff?
Yeah, I don't think he minds.
No, not at all. Yeah, I am writing a book now about how my time with Doc and Merle,
Oh man, that's
and
awesome.
and it's funny. I didn't. I thought, well, how in the world can I flesh this out to where it would be a book? And I'm barely started at my tenure with Doc and Merle, and I'm already up to over 10,000 words.
Yeah, I'm saying there's got to be a lot in there, man.
Yeah,
I'd like to scratch at the surface today a little bit. You know,
absolutely.
I've just being around the scene and kind of getting able to pick with Sam and uh Marty Stewart and people like that, people that have been around Doc and Merle, and I've heard quite a few good stories. Some of them probably which we won't even tell.
There's quite a few of those. You've been on the road. You know some of those yourself.
Yeah, I've heard some good ones, but man, I guess maybe we should dive into before you met Doc. How did you get started in music to begin with?
Well, most Southern boys, I sang in church,
Oh wow.
the choir.
Yep.
So, and I was, and then that sort of came to a halt when my voice changed, and that was sort of the synchronicity of that. And then I heard those four guys from Liverpool at the same time.
Oh yeah.
So I had been around. My uncle Woodrow played banjo. I'd been around that kind of music, and I sort of felt about that music the same way I think Doc felt about it. It was homemade music. It wasn't really a popular music. I know you probably know the story about Ralph Rensler telling Doc that, that's real music. People would really like to hear that.
Oh yeah.
And so my opinion of it was, that's just something we do when we sit around, at barbecues and stuff like that. But when the Beatles came out, when I heard them, it just sort of something clicked in my brain. Like I really want to do that. So through junior high and high school, I was in rock and roll bands, and that's good. That's a good place to be. I mean, I think Sam Bush sort of did the same thing, and
Yeah.
I'm sure Jerry Douglas did the same thing. It's a good place to be because it 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 lends to an anticipation of following someone else play because the possibilities of where chords can go.
Mhm.
And one thing that really helped me is with the bands I was in, I was the guy who learned the songs. So that sort of informed me of, sort of a little hillbilly music theory.
Oh yeah.
And so I had never heard of Doc Watson. And then I went to college. And I went to college in Boone, which is 10 miles from Deep Gap.
Mhm.
And I was in a music store one day, and it was Jeff Little, right? The keyboard player.
Yeah.
He played a lot. He played a lot with Doc. His father owned a music store, so I went in the music store one day, and there was some Doc Watson records, and I go, it said Boone's own, when it was really Deep Gap's own. Doc Watson. I go, who is that? And he goes, you don't know who that is? I go, no. And he gave me an album, and I went home and I listened to it, and pretty much immediately I got it. I said, this just is the epitome of groove and style and syncopation. And as a bass player, I said, I want to play with those guys. So
Yeah, man.
that led me up to Doc. When I became informed of him.
Wow. So what do you remember what record that was? What it was it some solo stuff?
Yeah, it was. I think it was his first solo
Yeah.
record,
Man.
which it just had. To me, I was into Zeppelin and all that stuff. To me, it was as heavy to me as anything that I heard done during the '60s. It
Man,
just had this
that is
heaviness about it.
that is such an interesting thing. I've had that same kind of realization at one point. One day I was around the house and I don't know, we were off the road and it was a nice summer day, and I ate this little tiny piece of a mushroom, and I was watching all sorts of videos and listening to records of Led Zeppelin and The Doors and Jimi Hendrix and all this stuff, just Black Sabbath and really
Hmm.
really rocking stuff. And I went outside for a while, and when I came back inside, somehow my YouTube channel had made its way back to Bill Monroe and the Bluegrass Boys, and that rocked harder than anything I was listening to. It was like I was just listening to Hendrix and Zeppelin and shit all day, and I came in back inside, and Bill Monroe, they were playing like Rawhide or something. It was like this
Right.
is way tougher than any of that stuff that I was just listening to.
Exactly. With and more stripped down and raw.
Yeah, and I mean the technical proficiency that the musicians were playing with. I mean, to hear that banjo is just like,
Oh
damn.
my God.
Yeah,
Was especially Earl Scruggs, which is like, it was like a metronome. It was.
yeah.
Did you ever get to play with Earl at all?
No, I never got to meet Earl.
Man, what a right hand that man had. Did you get to play with Doc?
No, in fact, I only saw you guys one time. I'd like to tell you about it. We were actually spying on you when we were eating at Wendy's. We were like, holy shit. Me and my family. Uh, it was funny because we saw you and David Holt in Wendy's. I'm like, I think that's David Holt and T. Michael Coleman or something. And this would have been in 2010.
Right.
And it was at the Midland Theater in Newark, Ohio.
Really?
The Hills of Home tour
Yeah.
with Richard, David, yeah, and Doc and yourself.
Right.
So man, when I was growing up, like I said, we worship Doc Watson around my house, and that's how I learned how to play guitar. He is, I know he's just a regular guy and everything, and I wouldn't want to make him feel weird or anything, but he was very much a god, like almost like a godlike figure, like around my house, like an idol, our hero. And
Right.
so, um, later, I grew up picking with my dad, and like we had played his music our whole life, and my dad, he was around back when you guys were doing your thing. He never got the chance to see you play.
Oh,
But it's like, so one day I was just thinking, wait a minute, why have we never went and saw Doc? So I started looking online, and I found tickets for the Midland Theater, and it was about 6 hours from where we're from, up there in Ionia, Michigan.
uh-huh.
So I bought tickets for me and my mom and my dad, and my buddy Benji drove us down there. And we drove 6 hours and came down there and saw y'all play, and it was man, I believe Shady Grove was the first song, maybe Way Downtown second or something. But by the time, we were in tears, man.
Oh, well.
Uh,
That's great.
It was, I was sitting there with my mom and my dad, and it was like, wow, Way Downtown, and there he is, like, Doc's right there. He's right there. We can't believe it. And I couldn't not cry. And I looked over and I saw that my dad was crying a little bit. We love him. We just love him so much, and he means him and his music and just the man that he was means so much to us and meant so much to us that was just such an amazing experience and a great show.
Well, you couldn't have picked a better musician to emulate. He was Doc always, even a great musician. He always says that something I do, not who I am.
Yeah,
And I think those two things always came across at the concert too. Made you feel at home.
absolutely. Yeah, and it was just such a beautiful show. Before the show started, there was a slideshow and a bunch of pictures of Merle as a boy and stuff, and it was just a beautiful thing.
Right. It was the best. When I started with him, uh, I was in a folk rock band after college, and we used to open up for Doc and Merle around Boone and North Carolina, and it was sort of like, think of Mumford and Sons and Avett Brothers, but this was in 1972. That's what kind of band this was. A little before our time, and Merle would hang out with us, and Merle would always be sitting in the corner. He would hang out because we were near his age,
Mm-hmm.
and he was always like observing. I'd feel he was observing me for some reason, and he waited until that band broke up, and pretty much the next day is when he asked me if I wanted to play with him, and it didn't take me long to respond.
Oh yeah.
It was, because I'd been pretty much ready for that ever since I heard that first record.
Oh yeah, man.
And it was,
That's
we never rehearsed, never, ever.
oh, I mean, you almost don't need to when you're playing, like, I don't know. It's just such
Right,
a,
right. You pretty much count to four and hang on.
yeah, and and Doc, and he's got the lead going, and
Right.
it's just
Well,
like,
the thing about the three of us is that especially Doc and Merle, is they were in tune, more than one way.
oh yeah.
But they but they read each other, and the three of us, we listened to what was going on, and it was never, as I said on the interview that for that album that came out from the boarding house, never the same way once.
Mm-hmm.
It was really no plan, and because Doc was really a mountain emotional musician, if he decided to go to the four chord early, he did.
Right.
I mean, I noticed you've heard songs where he does that.
Oh
Like
yeah.
I'm on, go on the upbeat, and we were able to follow that because we knew we could follow each other so well.
Yeah, it's quite a sound, man. A really driving sound, and I've always been a fan of two guitars, probably because of Doc and Merle.
Right?
Um,
They and it was. I've got some. I've made friends with tapers over the years, and they've given me some DAT tapes of some live shows. And the one thing that always strikes me is that the three of us, for three people, it really sounded like a freight train. It was just,
yeah, I
there was a
know.
lot of power for three people.
Man, yeah, you guys would play, something like Streamline Cannonball, and it was just cranking.
Right, it was cracking, and we, and playing those, you know, bluegrass, folk slash rock and roll festivals back in the '70s. You know, Merle realized that you can't really depend on that guy sitting out there, the sound guy, to stick a mic in front of you and it sounds right. So, they stuck Barkus Berry pickups on their guitars, even though they took a lot of flack about that.
Mm-hmm.
Doc always felt it was more important to be heard and
Absolutely.
was willing to sacrifice some tone, to be heard. And it wasn't really fair to the band that followed us because they came up and there was all this feedback for the first three songs that they played.
Yeah. Well, I mean, heck, I've adapted that kind of, thing myself, and it still kind of happens. I mean, I use a pickup, and I even run my guitar through effects pedals and all sorts of stuff. But we're doing some kind of psychedelic exploratory music. Um,
Yeah, I've seen stuff you do. It's great.
and we're having a blast. But man, yeah, if nobody would ever hear us if we didn't have a pickup.
That's very true. And in the studio, like most guitar players, they may use a pickup for a little enhancement, but they will depend on a really good $7,000 or $8,000 microphone out in front of the guitar as well.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
man.
are you with Round? Are you with Rounder?
Yeah, this last record that I put out was Rounder.
Wow. Yeah, when I first started, we were on a major label. We were United Artists, which was really interesting to be on that kind of that major label. But because there was a lot of support from the record labels back then. But that sort of went away.
Yeah. I'm looking here. I'm trying to see if I have some. I know I have some records. I got that one where y'all are sitting around the table with a couple beers.
Yeah. Oh, you're right. Is that the? That's the Doc and the Boys.
Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
that's a
Yeah.
heavy picture on the front of that thing, man. I like it. Let's see.
Yep. Yeah, we
Doc and
toured a
Merle.
lot.
I got Red Rocking Chair here. This is a great album.
Red Rocket Ship.
You
I
know,
love that record.
Sadie, that's the one I wanted to ask you about. That is such an awesome song. I love that one. And God, what was that like to have Doc sing that tune?
Uh, that's interesting because I had written. I was with them when I wrote that song, and I'm being a bass player. It's sort of hard to people don't sort of take you seriously as a vocalist or a songwriter or whatever unless you're Paul McCartney, and you sort of have to ease into it. So I would do things like I'd be in the dressing room and I'd get Merle's guitar and I would play that song, and you would see Doc sort of perk up and go, where'd you get that from?" And I said, "I wrote it. I made it up." And he goes, "Oh, well, what is it?" And so he learned it, and then we started doing it on stage, and it ended up, the first song on that album. And he liked it because it sounded like an old song.
Oh yeah, man, it's classic sounding. I love it, and it's got the verses are great. It's very kind of old timey feel.
But it's amazing how many Sadies I have met around the world that were named Sadie because of that song. That is the utmost compliment.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's my daughter's middle name.
Below Freezing is another interesting tune that's on that same record.
Yeah, that was sort of my counter to Windy and Warm.
Yeah.
It's funny because those songs that he recorded of mine and the songs we wrote together were just, he was constantly, he had I guess it was the gift of being blind, which is the way he looked at it, is that he would hear more than we would because that was, his number one sense. And I would be playing in the corner and he'd say, "Michael, what's that?" and I would play it for him, and next thing I know, he's playing harmony to it. And he'd say, "Merle, we ought to record this." And I'd go, he said, "And Michael, you should play lead." And I'm going, "What?" "You want me to play lead with you?"
Yeah.
But he was very given like that. It was very encouraging. And the other things with lyrics that we wrote, like Sitting Here Picking the Blues,
Mm-hmm.
I wrote the music and he wrote the words, which sort of seems contrary to what it should have been. And there's one that we wrote, the mountains, they're really big on murder tragedy songs.
Oh yeah.
Like Little Sadie and stuff like that. Well, Doc and I wrote one together, and I just found the words again. If I could, and Doc wrote the words. He wrote the story. It was someone that they were related to him, and I'm trying for the best of me to try to remember what the melody was for that song. And we were going to record it, but we never got around to it.
Oh wow, that'd be cool to record now, man.
Yeah, it would be. It's called Joey and Julie. And the cool thing about that, in his eulogy that I wrote for his funeral, I said that I mentioned a bunch of the songs that he had sung, and the fact that he knew the families of these people that these songs were written about, like Tom Dooley, and
Right.
he knew these people, and sometimes he was related to these people.
Mm-hmm.
So he was deep into the culture, which is why, and plus his blindness allowed him to go to a place where we can't go while he's singing live. He
Right.
really experienced the moment many times, and so many times that tears would be rolling down his face when he'd be singing the song because he was into it so much.
That's heavy.
It was pretty heavy. And like I said, it happened more than once. He was music was it was an extension of his soul, without a doubt.
Yeah. Well, that's
As it is for all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially, for somebody like him, maybe with such a beautiful soul, that's why he touched so many people.
Yeah, he did. It was no bullshit. It was what it was. I can't tell you how many times there have been people who were 100 times more famous than he that would come up to me and say, Michael, would you introduce me to Doc? It was Al Di Meola and Paul Simon and Pat Metheny. And the story about Pat Metheny, we were in LaGuardia Airport. We got on the Hertz bus, and Pat Metheny was sitting there with his band going to the Hertz car lot. And Pat Metheny, uh, he looks up and he goes, "Motherfucker, that's Doc Watson." It was like, oh my God. And he was afraid to talk to him.
Oh man, I would have been too. I think, like, holy shit, I probably would have said the same. I wouldn't have been able to say anything. Just blah, 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 blah.
Well, that's happened many times too.
Yeah. It's like, to me, it'd be like, meeting like Abraham Lincoln or something, man. He was,
I get it.
yeah.
I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah. The real deal. When Doc came to the forefront in New York City, as Doc and I used to call it, the folk scare of the '60s, where people sang in 4-part unison. And then he would go up to New York City, and all these people like Maria Muldaur and uh, uh, Roger McGuinn and Stephen Stills and all these people would go to those folk clubs because here was the real deal.
Yeah.
And Bill Monroe would go up there, and they would all sit around and they would learn from these guys. And that's why, and because of Doc's personality that would come from the stage, that they were enamored with him, and they would show up on his doorstep many times in the Blue Ridge Mountains, and he and Rosalie would invite him in.
Yeah. Yeah.
All those dang dirty hippies.
Yeah. There's I was talking to David Grisman a while back about the first time that he invited him up on stage, and I think that would have been back there at. So, what was that club that they used to play back then?
Gertie's Folk City?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that might have been it.
Yeah, that's the one he played a lot.
Yeah.
Or is it the one in Los Angeles?
No, I'm thinking on the East Coast.
Yeah, it was Gertie's Folk City, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I think that's where Dog maybe might have met him for the first time and got to pick with him. I think Ralph said, Doc, you got to let this kid play mandolin with you. And they did In the Pines or something like that.
I'll be darned. It's interesting. Doc also, during those times, he told me, play Jose Feliciano.
Wow.
They played Black Mountain Rag together, but there's no recording of that.
Man, to be able to hear that.
And one time, I think Doc was in London or somewhere, and Jimi Hendrix and he played together.
Oh, my gosh. Are you
On
kidding
the folk
me?
stage. No.
I think I'm going to throw up, or like something's going to happen. Like, I don't know. I'm having an experience right now, just knowing.
Well, Jimmy was over there. I think Jimmy, after he left, I think it was with James Brown or whoever he was with, he went over to London and he was playing in the folk clubs and stuff, I think.
Wow.
He and Doc, he came and played a song, a blues song. That's what Doc told me.
Man.
Yeah, pretty cool.
Oh, that's so cool.
And that's what, that's Doc was very, there was not a racist bone in his body. He didn't look down on anybody whatsoever. And it's probably a lot of people who know him know that didn't exist in him. But there's a stereotype that people probably think of someone from the mountains of North Carolina would have those feelings, but
right.
He did not whatsoever.
Right. Yeah, I mean, everything, of course, I never met him, and I never knew him, but I've read a lot, and I've listened to his music a lot, and listened to a lot of interviews and stuff, and he just seemed like such a sweetheart, and
he was,
and
without
the
a doubt.
Same for Rosalie and Merle and everybody up there, that whole clan.
Right. You pretty much live in the house they built, and that was that's the way they existed, and they felt they were better than no one, and no one was better than them. There's a story. I think Merle was standing with Bob Dylan at Newport or something. They were having a conversation, and I don't know if you know who Phil Oakes is. He was a folk singer back in the '60s, and uh, Bob Dylan walked away, and Phil Oakes said to Merle, "Don't you know who that is?" And Merle said something like, "I know who I am." That's pretty much it, and to show you their kindness, and they would not allow any disrespect. If we would go to a club or a festival, and they felt as though they were being disrespected or was somewhere, someplace, and back in the '70s, there were some very unsafe festivals,
Oh yeah.
and and if and they, they would leave. Merle would go, "Daddy, we don't have to do this," and we'd get in the car and we'd leave, no matter what. They would not get paid. They would always pay me,
Oh wow.
even though they would stick me on an airplane when I was living in Nashville and send me home and give me a check. But they they demanded respect and they earned respect.
Yeah. Absolutely. And yeah, they
Yeah,
deserved respect, man.
yeah. But there's people who think they deserve it that they don't deserve it. you know,
Yeah. Of
there's those
course.
who expect it but don't deserve it. we, we know those.
Yeah, and there's those that don't expect it and deserve it.
Right, right. Yeah, it's a fine line. So when you go to get back to work,
I have no idea. We have dates that are still on the books for like late August and stuff, but who knows? You know, uh,
it's going to be a while, man. It's just until they get a vaccine, it's going to be.
yeah, we are just I'm just sitting on the sidelines waiting it out. I'm trying to stay busy. Uh, been learning how to work on my cars and stuff as a I got a project car that I'm working on, a 66 Chevelle.
Wow.
And it's been a lot of fun to dig into that. My family,
What size is that? A 327? What size engine?
originally it was a 283 car with a power glide.
283.
Yeah,
Right.
and
Wow.
I put a 388 stroker in it with a 700 R4 tranny and 355
Wow.
gears, and so it's gonna be like an awesome car by the time I'm done with this thing.
It'll sound like a real car.
Oh yeah, it already does. It's pretty healthy sounding.
I like that. You would believe the sound of the cars in my high school parking lot
Oh
when I
man,
GTOs and 442s and oh
yes.
man. I mean, every day it was like,
That's the best.
oh man, what a sound that
Yeah,
was.
I'm a little bit too young I'm too young for that.
Uh,
But
but you're making one though.
yeah, absolutely. I'm getting in there. And my grandfather, he was into hot rods and stuff, and he did a lot of that. He
Wow,
when he was younger, he raced on a dirt track, stock cars and stuff.
wow. I had an Uncle Buster who was a dirt track race car driver. Of course he was. His name was Buster. Every weekend he would 311 racetrack. He'd be up there racing. And he raced until he was in his 70s when he stopped racing. The racing grandpa.
Wow,
And
that is awesome.
he always helped me get my cars growing up. We lived next door to him. My first car was a 1950 Super Deluxe Chevrolet with a mother of what I call a mother of toilet seat steering wheel.
Yeah,
And
man.
when you pressed on the gas, the wiper blades would stop because they're a vacuum.
Oh,
So,
awesome.
something that was interesting about Doc is he knew how to work on he couldn't physically work on the car, but he could tell you what to do on the car
Yeah.
because we were right. I don't know if you've heard this story, but we were going to Nashville to play the Exit In, and Merle was not with us for some reason. I think he had gone out early to a studio, and the Winnebago just stopped between Knoxville and Nashville. And Doc diagnosed the problem as being the fuel pump. And so a couple of guys got out and hitchhiked into Knoxville, got a fuel pump, and came back. And Doc told me how to replace the fuel pump. He said, look here, do that. You see this? One thing he forgot to tell me was to shut off the fuel.
Oh, yeah.
So, funny thing about that is we needed a deep well socket wrench.
Right.
And we didn't have a deep well socket, but guess where we found it?
Oh, it was Merle's, wasn't it?
It was Merle's. It was Merle's slide. It was 9/16, and I changed it, and it started right up. And the next night, the funny thing, at the exit in, Merle stuck his finger into the slide, and grease came out the top.
Oh man, that's great. Oh, well, gotta have a good fuel pump, you know.
Yeah, I reckon. Like you got to have a heart and a fuel pump.
Yeah, Doc.
So you talked to Peter?
Yeah, I did. I just got off the phone with Peter. I had some like technical difficulties on Peter's call. At first, I started recording and I called him, and Peter goes hello, and then all of a sudden I start hearing my conversation with another guest, Bill Inershi. So I had Bill Inershi and Peter Rowan both talking at the same time. Like, I got to call you back. So then I got that going. And then Peter and I talked for about a half hour, and then we lost power. So I don't have power right now, which is really strange. And I got my little board that's it's being powered by my MacBook, so we're all good.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're without power, which is okay, for a little bit.
So did Peter tell you about the tour we took with the Dirt Band? Did he talk about any of that stuff?
No, we didn't.
Well, John McEwen set up this tour. It was Jimmy Ibbotson and John McEwen, Doc Merle and myself, and Peter Rowan and Mark O'Connor.
Mm-hmm.
And we did a tour on the Dirt Band bus, and boy, was that fun. And the most fun was on the bus. I talked to John the other day. We were reminiscing about that tour, about how much fun that was. That's when I first got to know Peter.
Man, I love hearing about those times, man, and thinking about that stuff, because I've listened to all those records and I've heard a lot of live recordings and videos and shit. I mean, when I was a teenager, that's all I did, is try to find as many videos of you guys as I could find on YouTube and just watch them all. There's this one video I found from some like local college or news thing or something, and Doc, everybody's so rowdy that Doc's like, look, man, I ain't gonna pick if you guys can't stop like shouting.
Yeah.
He said, if you shout,
that happened.
If you shout, I won't pick.
And there was one time we played a corporate event. This was with Jack Lawrence, and I don't know if you've ever done those things, but they're not listening.
Oh yeah.
They don't even know what they're listening to. So I think we played Red Hair Boy for a half hour. Doc leaned over to me and said, Michael, screw him. Let's play Red Hair Boy.
Because it's easy and, nobody's listening anyways, and it's just a good little tune, It takes no effort.
We just played. When we finished, nobody clapped. That's the first time that had ever happened.
Yeah, no kidding. And man, that just feels weird. That's why those gigs are terrible.
Oh, they are. They are. And one of my favorite times is when we did a little tour with Chet Atkins to promote that record they did together. That was a blast, man.
Oh,
Let me tell you. And the best part is when they're just sitting around playing. Backstage.
Oh man,
that is the best. And my favorite story is we did a bunch of the late night shows. We did Johnny Carson, and me and Paul Yandell, I think his name was, we would always sit off stage, and there would be Doc and Chet would be on the stage, and we were doing a sound check, and I felt this presence beside me, and I looked up, and it was Johnny Carson. And Johnny Carson looks at me and goes, "Son, wouldn't your mother like to see you on TV tonight?" I go, "Probably." And he looked at the stage manager, and they moved us on stage. Matter of fact, there's a YouTube video with me on stage on Johnny Carson. And the best thing about it is we start the song and Chet Atkins looks over me and nods. And I go, "Okay, I win."
Yep.
Yep. That man, what could he play guitar? Oh my God.
Gosh, yeah, I love that stuff that they did together, man. Don't you monkey around my witter.
I love that song.
Yeah.
But the funny thing about that record is we recorded the record and the engineer had screwed up my bass somehow and it was distorted. So I get a phone call from Chet. He says, "Won't you come to my house and we'll fix that." So you can imagine I'm sitting in Chet Atkins' studio in his basement, right beside him, overdubbing these bass parts.
Yeah, man.
Him watching every move is like, oh my God. But he was a very nice man. He was very nice.
Yeah, that's quite a feeling.
So I've gotten to hang around quite a few great guitar players in my life.
Yeah, and man, one of the absolute best in my book, and that will always be my absolute favorite. I mean, there's so many great musicians and so many wonderful people who I, admired and listened to growing up and stuff. But Doc will always be on top of the list, And I love being able to, talk to you. It's really great and great to hear these stories and stuff. And I sometimes think about what it would have been like if I would have been like a little, born a little bit earlier and had gotten to meet Doc and stuff. What it would have been like to pick with him, man. I would have.
Well, I can guarantee you this one thing. You would have probably been going out on the road with us.
Yeah, well.
Because they're quite a, there was a time when Merle didn't want to travel very much. And I don't, for a while there was a guy named Dave Sylvester that went out and played with us.
Mm-hmm.
Doc just really, if he sat down with the guitar player, they would end up going on the road with us. Mark O'Connor went with us, and Marty Stewart and Sam Bush. So I'm sure you would have been there right with us.
Yeah, it's fun to think about, and I play along with the records a lot and stuff like that. And
yeah, that's fun to do. That's
yeah,
fun to do. And that's what I really like doing the Frosty Morn thing, because it felt like I was back in that seat again. And I love that song, Frosty Morn. Oh man, that's just heavy as it gets.
It's so great. Yeah, I mean, I feel like so lucky that my dad, turned me on to that stuff and showed me those records, taught me those tunes. I mean, like when I was 5 and 6 years old, that's when he was like showing me Beaumont Rag and stuff like that, and he was like really, he wasn't serious about it in a way that he was pushing it on me, but he was passionate about it.
Right.
In a way that made it seem very cool and made me want to do it.
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
He wasn't being he was not being pushy about it. He was just sharing his love for it, which is a good thing.
Absolutely. And has since, like, now I have a good life, and
yeah.
And thanks to the music, I mean, in a lot of ways thanks to Doc. As a flat picking guitar player, to make a living, it's like a lot of times I say, man, who knows if Doc wouldn't have came along and started playing fiddle tunes on the guitar.
Well, you need to take some credit for your for practice and playing.
Yeah.
Someone puts you on the road, but you got to drive the car.
Yeah, it's true. And but when I was a little kid, I just got so interested in it, and I've never not been interested in it, and it's always been my favorite stuff,
Right. Hopefully you'll always have the passion to do it.
Another thing about it is, I think is that it reminds me of my dad. Man, when I hear Alberta or look up, look down, that lonesome road, or them
Right.
them tunes like that, man, it hits me right in my heart because it brings me right back to those days when I was 5 or 6 years old and I was sitting there, um, listening to that music with my dad.
Right.
And
It's funny you should mention those because I just recorded 2 videos of me doing those 2 songs.
that's weird.
It's weird. Uh-oh, uh-oh. So how many days a year do you tour now? Usually.
Upwards of at least 170. I mean, for the
Yeah.
past like probably 10 years or so, it's been almost 200 gigs a year. Um,
Yeah. When I first started with Doc and Merle, I toured 210 days the first year.
man, that's cranking it. And
That
then
was it was great.
Merle didn't. No, I mean, no wonder he didn't want to be on the road. It's like-
Well, at first we were driving everywhere.
oh yeah.
That and then we switched to going private planes
Oh
because it was
really?
only three of them. Yeah. Well, we would meet in Wilkesboro. I was living in the mountains then. We all were, and we would, play the festival. We would just fly out of Wilkesboro, go play the festival, and come home that night.
oh, that's
So
the best.
that was the best. That was pretty cool. And there were times when I remember Mole Lake, Wisconsin. There were no cell phones back then, and how were they to know that we were getting ready to land at this small airport? So what we did, we buzzed the festival. And so we buzzed the festival, and they came out to pick us up. It was pretty cool.
I heard one
And
story.
then there were those times that weren't so fun,
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
but the playing was always fun, except when the sound sucked.
Yeah, I've heard some good stories from Sam about there was times where maybe somebody didn't want to pay you guys or something, and Merle made sure that didn't happen.
Absolutely, we did,
Yeah,
and sometimes more than forceful manner.
yeah, yeah. I hear that.
Yeah, but funny. You know who Sonny Terry and Brownie McGee were, right? You've heard of them?
Yeah, yeah. Sonny Terry, I've heard of them.
So there was one time we played a show with them, and I think Merle went to go get his money, and all of a sudden he's hearing these gunshots, and it was Sonny Terry, who's a blind man. He's got a gun and he's shooting it up. Give me my money!
That's great.
Good times, good times.
Yeah, it's not like that anymore. I mean,
No,
you might not get paid, but you can't.
no, no. And I'm not advocating that. I'm not saying that is a good thing to do. I'm an
it
old
was a
pacifist
different
hippie.
time.
It was a different time. I'm not encouraging that at all. We have too much of that right now.
Yeah, no kidding.
We need a little more gentleness, and I won't get political.
Well,
But anyway,
speaking of being on the road so dang long, there was another story that I heard about Marty Stewart, and I talked to him about it, but where you guys must have been so tired at the airport because he fell asleep right on the luggage thing and was like,
is that what he said it was? I won't tell you what it really was.
yeah.
He fell asleep. Well, I guess he did.
Yep.
It's interesting. Doc and Merle was sort of a halfway house with people that had left their bands. Like when Marty left Lester, Merle said, "Well, why don't you go on the road with us?" And I always got to room with these guys. That's why I got so close with these guys. So Marty came, and then he got his job with Cash. Then when Sam left Newgrass Revival, Merle said, "Come play with us." There's videos of all this.
Oh yeah.
And then when Mark O'Connor left the Dixie Dregs, Mark came and played with us a while.
Yeah. That's
So,
cool.
they were very supportive of people who were sort of halfway between gigs, and they helped them out a lot. So that should tell you a lot about
Absolutely, man. That's so cool.
them. It was very cool.
And like, it's cool and it's cool of them to do that.
Yeah, it was very good. And musically, it didn't suck either.
Oh no, I mean, 'cause it's nice to have Sammy up in there.
Oh God, the right hand from God.
Yep. And all the energy and spunk you'd ever need out of that boy.
Oh yeah, I love Sam. I knew Sam before I started playing with Doc and Merle, which was interesting.
Yeah. And did you do a little stint with the Seldom Scene as well, right?
Was with him for 9 years.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I thought. That's not very much a little stint.
No, that was an interesting time because I had been with Doc for a long time, and Doc was threatening to retire, so I had a family, and I was thinking about that. And then the Seldom Scene offered me a job, and I moved my family to DC. And the only thing I can say, I love the Seldom Scene, but the difference rhythmically between the two
Oh yeah.
is large.
Yeah, 'cause it's so laid back.
Yeah, it was. I do love what they did, and I understand why people love them so much. Especially the first iteration of that band was so different and so floaty. That it was folk music is what it was.
Yeah, so good.
And and I had just come from playing with Doc, and it was like, right on the top edge of the beat all the time. Just hard as you can go, balls to the wall.
Yeah.
And then there was all of a sudden there was this a lot of air. Is what I can say. It was a different thing, but I love John Duffy and I love Aldridge, all those guys. It was nice to be around all those guys, and I learned a lot from them.
Yeah, I'd like to learn some more from them, 'cause I've done a lot of that. Like I said, I grew up. I mean, I learned how to play by listening to you guys play that hard driving stuff, all that Black Mountain Rag and
Right.
just stuff like that. And when I listen to like Seldom Scene and stuff, it's like, man, I need to dive a little bit more into that world of tasteful restraint.
Tasteful restraint. That's exactly what it was.
Yeah.
It was very tasteful restraint. And then you have Chesapeake, was like, oh my God, it hurt my brain to play that stuff. Did you ever listen to that stuff?
I think I've heard that one. Yeah, it's kind of crooked.
Well, the Chesapeake, the band with Mike Aldridge and Jimmy Gaudreau and me.
Oh,
Did you ever
no,
hear?
no, I never heard that.
Yeah, I think you would find it very interesting. It was pretty much before its time as well. It was pretty cool stuff.
I'll have to check that out.
So I left Seldom Scene, and we had that band. It was so great, at the end of Doc's career, that he asked me to come back and play with him more. So that was very, very cool to be able to do that.
Yeah. Well, it was
So if you want me to, like I said, I've got some live DATs there. I can, run off a digital copy of stuff and send it to you if you want to hear some of that stuff,
man.
live stuff.
Yeah, I'd love to hear that.
Yeah, it's pretty cool stuff, especially his banter in between. But the one thing I can say about Doc Watson's playing, his right hand, to me, was his right hand and the way he held his pick. You know why he held his pick the way he did? Did you ever hear that story?
No.
He held he held his pick that way because the Sears and Roebuck manual about guitar said that's the way you were to hold your pick. So if you take your index finger, and bend it all the way back and lay your thumb across it, that's how he held his pick. And just
Yeah.
a little bit of the point sticking out, sort of like that's the reason they have that staccato sound. He sort of hit his fingers on the string the pick at the same time.
Yeah.
But when he backed him, what he played behind his singing was amazing.
Oh man, I
The
know.
The licks that he played while he sang, it's one thing that Brian talks about. we'll be listening to an old Doc tune, and he goes, "Listen, right here, he's singing and he's playing this."
I know. Yeah, I mean, s a lot of times, you know, learning Doc stuff on guitar and trying to figure it out, sometimes you just almost can't. It's like something like St. James Hospital. I mean,
Right,
I figured out that technique, but you know that whole down with the thumb and then the double up with the index. You know
right.
like that little triplet thing that he could do so fluently, and gosh, it's just incredible. I mean, I don't know how you can keep that going and then start singing, you know, early one morning.
Right.
It's like, holy shit, this guy's good.
Oh, I heard you on that thing you guys did at the station, and you and Brian. You guys did Black Mountain Rag.
Yeah,
You know that thing you do on the guitar that you sort of time the guitar, doom, 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 doom.
yeah.
It's sort of a, you know what Doc called that?
What do you call it?
Auto harp.
Oh yeah, the little like it sounds like an auto harp. Yeah,
That's what he said he was trying to emulate as an auto harp.
man, that's so crazy because there's this other sort of technique that's similar to that. I mean, I guess it is sort of the same thing, you know. You're hitting your thumb on the string a little bit, and it's sounding like that. You get those harmonics, which
Right,
is yeah, that's so incredible. And it's also like, you know, the ding dong. That's like a fiddle thing. I mean, it's all fiddle stuff, but
right,
but you know the little trick that the fiddle player does, where he flicks the string with his left hand, and then he hits the note with the bow
right.
during that little part. I mean, that's so cool that Doc figures out that little harmonic thing to do it on guitar. And yeah, my dad, when I was a little kid, his mother, my grandma Doreen, had just passed away not too long ago, and I heard him in the room playing these chimes like that, and he was playing "Mary of the Wild Moor,"
Yeah.
and he was doing these chimes, you know, like she used to play on the hammer dulcimer. He was like playing her part,
Oh,
and I was like, I mean, I was listening from the other side of the door, and it's like, holy shit, it sounds like Grandma's in there with him, you know,
wow.
and yeah, so that's how I started to learn that little thing, is because I watched my dad play Mary of the Wild Moor too, and then I realized that's what Doc was doing, you know, for Black Mountain Rag, and I started to try to do that. And yeah, that's such a fun thing to play. I mean, a lot of people play that tune and they don't put that in there, but it's so fun to put that little chime in
And
there.
they don't put the extra little turn in there too before you go to the four chord. You guys did. Doc added that, I think. You know what I'm talking about? It goes longer than most people play it.
Yeah, I think so.
And and how about that run at the end?
Yeah, of course, you got to get that in there.
I know that was one of the best tributes after Doc died. I don't know if you saw it, Brian. That was his tribute to Doc. He just played that lick. Is all he did. So I'm gonna leave you with this and make you jealous. Imagine riding down the road at like midnight, like somewhere in New Mexico, and there sits Doc Watson on his bunk playing the banjo and playing the song that he would never play on stage that was probably 100 years old. And I'm sitting there and I'm getting to hear this.
Yeah, man.
That was something special.
Yeah, it's too much.
It is. It was, and it's one of those things, proximity brings familiarity, but then all of a sudden you turn around and you go, damn, that's Doc Watson, just like Pat Metheny.
Yeah, no
and
kidding.
I'm sitting up here with him and I'm playing.
Yep. And doing a
And
fine
yeah,
job, man, singing that tenor and stuff too. You know, keeping that bass going with the Gibson grabber.
no, it was a Honer
Oh,
Ripper.
that's the bass.
It's a Honer Black Widow is what it's called,
Yeah, that thing's
and it's a
cool.
very rare bird.
Wait, is it fretless?
It is. It has little white lines underneath the third the E and the A string has little white lines. Is all it is. But when you're over the top of the bass, the lines look as though they go all the way down.
Yeah.
But I always loved that bass. And with every band I've ever been in, it's a different bass fit the sound of the band I was in. And that's the one that fit with Doc and Merle the best. And I had one of them stolen in Japan, which is unusual.
Oh man.
And I found one in Tulsa, Oklahoma, because I didn't make it anymore.
Yeah.
Oh, how many 800 service calls do you get a day?
Very many.
It's ridiculous.
Well, all right, T. I'm man. Thanks for taking the time and to chat and for sharing some stories. I really appreciate it. And
well, you just keep at it and you stay safe out there.
Yeah, man, I will. And we'll get together one of these times and pick a bunch of tunes. I know it's going to be fun.
Well, I know. I would love for me, you, and Jack Lawrence to sit down and play. It would just be a pocket you could fall into.
Let's make it happen.
All right, buddy. Be safe.
You too, man. Have a great day.
Okay. Bye.
How cool was that? T. Michael has some of the best stories we've heard. I can almost picture that Johnny Carson moment. And how about him saying that Doc would have taken Billy out on the road? Imagine that. Thanks to T. Michael for picking up today. I'm really hoping he and Billy get together to make some music real soon. As usual, we'll keep you updated. Tune in next time when Billy gets on the line with Grammy winner Peter Mad Cat Reed. Mad Cat's an old buddy of Billy's. He's put on more albums than you can possibly imagine, including 2017's Turmoil and Sympathy. If you're not familiar with him, you probably should be. Better tune in and see what he's got to say. For now, take care of each other, take care of yourselves. We'll be back real soon. Bye now.